Production funding for Ruckus has been provided by Fred and Lou Hartwig and viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon. The Ruckus join me shortly, and our topics tonight: the minimum wage becomes the maximum topic, La Raza comes to town and presidential candidates follow, and another attack on Sam Brownback. Plus roast and toast. But we start with our Newsmaker segment and welcome someone who is part of our conversation here almost every week. He's the recently re-elected mayor of Kansas City, Missouri, Sly James, about to embark on term number 2 after winning 87% of the vote in the June election. Mayor James is facing some interesting challenges, and he joins us now to talk about them. Mr. Mayor, welcome to Ruckus. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mike. It's nice to be here.
And congratulations on your re-election victory.
Thank you very much.
As we're taping this interview, obviously the City Council has not yet met to decide the fate of the minimum wage increase.
Yes.
By the time this is on the air, the Council presumably will have met and decided. Can you give us your best guess about what's going to happen?
I think that there is a clear appetite and desire of the council to do something with the minimum wage. We have some parameters that have been established, but we're certainly by no means locked in on everything yet. There will be a lot of intense negotiation today, and by the end of the day, I expect us to have some sort of a measure that increases the minimum wage over a period of time to 2021, 2022, 2020, something in that neighborhood. Not really sure on the numbers yet. We'll get there. And a few other things. The problem that I think we will have is the enforcement and regulatory scheme, which will take us a considerable amount of time to put together, and we're not even close to that yet.
Well, the opponents have threatened they will go to court if this passes. Do you expect litigation?
I do. But you know, the fact or the fear of litigation doesn't stop us from doing what we need to do.
Or you wouldn't do anything.
Or we wouldn't do anything.
Well, what about this argument that state law already precludes the city from raising the minimum wage?
Well, there's certainly a good and solid argument that the existing law before HB 722 did exactly that, and in fact that was our opinion. However, House Bill 722 was then passed, which left what a lot of legal observers and our council believed was a window within which to act. So then we were forced to act in order to fill that window. Despite the fact it has been vetoed, until the legislature acts, we still have to act as if that window is a possibility.
Are you concerned, moving on to another matter, are you concerned about the CFRG, Citizens for Responsible Government, beginning an initiative petition campaign? In fact, it was announced on this program to try to put the Convention Hotel downtown on the ballot. Are you afraid that this might delay implementation of the plan?
Yes, I am, but I'm not afraid of the issue. You know, I don't have a problem with people having disagreements about what we should and shouldn't do. I do, however, think that the initiative petition process, as valuable as it is entirely too easy of a jump in Kansas City. If you're going to try to legislate and regulate and govern by initiative petition, you ought to have to get more than 1,500, 1,700 people to sign a piece of paper in order to do that.
Is there anything you can do to preclude that?
Well, the only thing that can happen is a charter change, and it's kind of difficult to do at this moment, but we'll get there eventually, because I think people will see that when we're paying $500,000 for elections on things that could have been resolved a lot easier, that's not the most efficient way to do that. We have no desire to become governed like California, which is everything by initiative petition, and you get a patchwork.
During your second term, do you hope to expand the streetcar line?
I'm going to wait and see what happens on streetcar right now. I think that the thing that I'm most anxious about about with streetcars, getting it up and running in 16. And I think after it's up and running in 16, people will see why it's an important part of our transportation infrastructure, and they will want it expanded, and then we can have that conversation. But right now we have a lot of things on our plate, and I'd like to finish those. After the streetcar is up and running in 16, we'll have that conversation.
Well, one of the things on your plate is the future of Kansas City International Airport.
Absolutely.
Well, where's that headed?
Well, we're going to have a briefing of both councils on the 21st, and I think the airlines will tell us.
Both meaning the outgoing and incoming?
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think the airlines have a very clear idea of what they think needs to happen in order to satisfy their needs over the course of the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. We have to do things that make sense. We have to do things that are efficient, and we'll listen to the people who are actually going to be providing the service as to what infrastructure they need to provide the best service. But we should be clear, we're talking about a 40-year-old edifice, 40-year-old structures that need some work, need serious work, and need to be reshaped in order to meet future demands. So how that happens, I'm going to leave to the experts, and they'll come and tell us what they think we ought to do.
All right, we have just a few seconds left, so a quick final question.
Yes.
You've been mayor for 4 years. What has surprised you about being mayor?
The total lack of spontaneity in my own life.
Huh?
Everything,
you mean you're programmed, your day is
everything
now programmed?
is planned out, everything is locked in, and it's not like I can walk home or walk into the house at night and say, hey, why don't we just go to the game tonight? Doesn't quite work like that.
Why don't you go to the game tomorrow night?
I'd love to.
All right, Mr. Mayor, thank you for coming by. Come back and see us again.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
That is the mayor of Kansas City, Missouri, Sly James. Now let's meet the Ruckettes and start a ruckus. Jim Heater is a former councilman and is now president and CEO of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. Gwen Grant is president and CEO of the Urban League in Kansas City. Mary O'Halloran is a media and communications consultant, and Woody Cozad is president of the Cozad Company, a government relations firm. So let's begin with some of what the mayor and I talked about. It appears the minimum wage issue, which has been a major source of debate the past several weeks, is finally being resolved. There is a strong likelihood opponents will take the issue to court, saying it is illegal for cities to raise the minimum wage above the level set by the state of $7.65 an hour. That argument may well be bolstered by Governor Jay Nixon's veto of a bill, which seemed to give cities discretion if they acted before August the 28th. For the sake of our discussion, let us say the minimum wage is increased in Kansas City, Missouri. Jim, in general, how do you think the business community is going to react?
Well, Mike, at the invitation of Mayor James and City Council, the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce submitted the position paper on this issue, this set of issues, a couple of weeks ago. That was a very, I think, very thoughtful and very measured position paper, and I think it added some balance to the discussion. It reflected the views of our business members, particularly those who employ a number of minimum wage workers, and we focused on the effect on those businesses and also in the greater business climate in Kansas City. I think it did add balance to the discussion, and I'm hopeful that when the council and the mayor make their final decision in the very near future, that that will have had effect in producing a good result.
What did your report say? To raise the minimum wage?
No, our report essentially said that we were concerned about the proposals at the time. As you know, there are many proposals floating around. There are a lot of moving parts on this issue, but our position paper essentially said that we thought that the numbers being discussed at that time were too great and the length of time in which they would be implemented were too short. So we advocated smaller numbers in terms of the increase and also a longer period of time for businesses to adjust.
What were you told the range would be, going from $8.50 to $13 over a period of 7, 8 years?
As high as 15 in some cases. And so we suggested a more measured response, which I think is where the council is going to come out. I think they're going to reach a compromise that hopefully will make sense for the community, and I think that the Chamber's position will have had a role in that.
Gwen, you've been following this pretty closely, I think. What's your expectation of the council?
Well, I believe my expectation is that they will make a vote to raise the minimum wage. They were requested to raise it to, I believe, $10, and then to increase it to up to $15 by 2020 something, by 2020 or something. And the Chamber's recommendation is to move it, I think, to 2023. The $10 calculation is more in alignment with what the people wanted who actually put forth got the signatures to have a ballot initiative. So if they don't get that increase today, when they vote on it, I think later today, then that would possibly cause this group to go ahead and force, put it on the ballot. Let the voters
Well,
decide.
they started out wanting to put it on the ballot.
And then they were convinced to give the council an opportunity to deliberate, which they have done. But I think if the council comes in with a recommendation of what, $8.20, $8.20?
It starts at $8.50 and goes to either $13 or $15 by 2020
but
or 23.
extending it out to 2023, I think those may be non-starters for that group. They have the petition signed. They may push it to a ballot.
Mary, you support this, I think.
Sure.
What is the major reason that you find to support an increase in the minimum wage?
Well, the first reason is that when the minimum wage was first established as a wage floor in the United States, it was a very fair amount, and I can't remember how low it was, something like $2.25 or something. Had we kept going on a cost of living increase basis over the years, we would now be paying a living wage.
Which would be what?
Of around $10 and something here in Kansas City. And
well, the proponents don't say that's a living wage. They say it has to be 15, don't they?
By 20,
no, they're talking about an incremental range, which really is highly controversial and needs to be dealt with in an incremental way. But now to go to somewhere around $9 or between $9 and $10 is a very reasonable thing. Secondly, I agree with the mayor. I don't like petition governing, especially with the Kansas City rules. And I think that the chamber and the business side and the other side of this question have done a very good job of trying to keep it, the addition somewhere around $9. So, is that correct, Jim? Is it kind of where you all landed?
I think it's $8.50 actually.
That's correct.
It's $8.50,
yep.
which is
But essentially that's right.
Which is a lot less than $10 an hour, which is a livable wage.
But 10 is a livable wage, right?
Opponents of an increase say that this will lead to unforeseen consequences. Do you agree with that, Woody?
Well, everything you do in government does. So that.
Well, for example, what would some of them likely be?
Well,
that we
they're
can't
not
see now?
we can only talk about the foreseen ones, right? That's the nature of unforeseen.
Well, they're talking about lack of jobs.
Okay, that's not unforeseen. That's something that's always an argument about the minimum
unforeseen by proponents, let us say.
Well, they know this is a problem. Look, it depends on circumstances. If you're in North Dakota, where they're fracking natural gas right now, and you want to raise the minimum wage to $12 an hour, no one will notice, because the average starting wage up there ranges between $12 and $15 right now, because the demand for labor is so high and the supply doesn't match it. So the market's already bumped it way beyond this discussion up there. We're not in North Dakota. We're in a city that constitutes just over 20% of the metro area by population. Business mobility is pretty easy in this metro area. We're in a place where there's not a big demand for labor right now, where the job market is not growing in Kansas City, Missouri. So this is kind of the opposite of North Dakota. This is not
the opposite.
We are not having the market drive up the price of jobs.
To wrap it up, businesses might move, and Sam Brownback would welcome them to the state of Kansas.
We'd be glad to welcome them to Kansas, but they can go to Lee Summit. They can go anywhere outside Kansas City, Missouri.
National Council of La Raza, a major Hispanic organization, is wrapping up its conference in Kansas City. Thousands of people traveled to Bartle Hall during the last several days to get updates on education, civil rights, health care, and immigration reform. 3 Democratic presidential candidates addressed the group: Hillary Clinton, Martin O'Malley, and Bernie Sanders. According to Janet Murguia, president and CEO of La Raza, a KCK native, none of the GOP candidates, and there's certainly a plethora of them, agreed to appear. She calls that disappointing and disheartening. Woody, you were the Missouri GOP chairman, I think, back in 1996. Do you also find it disappointing and disheartening?
Not really. Look, the job of the Republican Party is to try and get more Latino votes, not to get the approval of organizations that purport to represent them. When you get outside California, New Jersey, and New York, those 3 states which Republicans aren't going to win anyway, we do decently, not what we want to do, but we do decently with the Latino vote. Last November, just 8 months ago in Texas, our statewide ticket averaged in the mid 40% of the Latino vote. One of them actually broke the majority. And that's sufficient for us to elect people when we're in that
But
range.
not to the White House, though. Doesn't it take around 34, 35% to be elected to the White House for a Republican to pull that percentage of the Spanish vote?
Well, and we got over 40 in Texas. That's what I'm saying.
But I'm talking about nationwide.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter in New Jersey and California. We're not getting those electoral votes, okay? Well, you don't get the votes nationwide in a presidential election. You get them state by state. And I'm telling you, when you're outside California, New York, and New Jersey, we're doing decently with them, and we're beating the margins we need to carry those states.
So are you saying because of that, you just want to, like, you know,
No, we're spending a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of effort to do better.
When George,
look, I wanted to reach out for the black vote for years. I've had a hard time convincing Republicans to do it. But if I wanted to do it, I wouldn't go to an NAACP meeting.
When George Bush won in 2004, he had 40% of the Hispanic vote.
That was
Mitt Romney had 27% and lost in 2012. Janet Murguia says Latinos are pulling away from the GOP because leading candidates are reluctant to criticize Donald Trump's comments about illegal Mexican immigrants for fear of alienating the GOP base.
Drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Is it fair to judge all the GOP candidates because of remarks by one of them? Gwen?
Well, you know, it's fair if they don't repudiate the remarks made by someone like Donald Trump. I mean, I think is fair. But I think what happens when you have a loose cannon like Donald Trump out speaking as a member of the party, then you have a party that totally snubs the NCLR conference. I think what people are more concerned about is the policies and platforms of the Republican Party itself. And so those are the things that alienate the voters.
Anything other than immigration?
Oh, well, yeah, you know,
like what?
Minimum wage. They're opposing a federal minimum wage, same-sex marriage. They're doubling down on voting rights. All of those things that the Republican Party, their policy positions, choice, in abortion rights for women, so there are a number of things. But when the policies and platform of the party, I think, are served to alienate these groups. And so when they don't speak out against Donald Trump, who makes these acidic, polarizing comments, that's a problem.
Well, a number of Republican candidates have criticized
but the party has been really low-key.
Parties don't engage in primary issues like that.
Well, they met with Donald Trump. Reince Priebus met with Donald Trump privately.
Talked to him by the phone.
But according to Donald, he wasn't repudiating.
Jim,
so what is the real stance
if
of the
GOP
party?
candidates had traveled to Kansas City to speak before La Raza, how do you think they would have been treated?
Well, I know they would have been treated very cordially by Kansas Cityans, and I'm sure they would have been treated very cordially by La Raza. I'm actually a little bit surprised that some of those GOP candidates didn't make the trip to Kansas City to speak to La Raza. I think it says a lot that Secretary Clinton, Senator Sanders, Governor O'Malley did make the trip. They did speak to La Raza. I think also we should focus on the importance of having the La Raza Convention in Kansas City. That's a really big deal. That's an important gathering for the Latino and Hispanic communities. It's highly significant that they came to Kansas City, a very diverse community, to have that meeting, and we were pleased to host
and chose not to come in 2009,
let me
as
just
you'll
say
recall.
something about Janet, our own local Janet Murguia.
Right.
I mean, she really is a woman of her word.
Indeed.
She said, I'm taking this, I will not allow this convention to come home. I wanted it to because of Mayor Funkhouser's policies. She not only brought this, I was there for
one policy, one appointment.
She brought thousands of people, the most upbeat, energetic, only a little part was the presidential candidates, incredibly competent people at their forums. It was an amazing show of strength on the part of the Latino community.
And I assume brought in a lot of money to Kansas City.
Well, let's hope so. It sure looked like it would.
Okay, another week. Another article attacking Kansas Governor Sam Brownback by star columnist Steve Rose. Rose compares Brownback to the late segregationist Arkansas Governor Orville Faubus. Rose analogizes Faubus's opposition to the Supreme Court ruling on school integration to Brownback's comments about decisions by both the Kansas Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court. The Kansas issue involves school finance. The federal issue, same-sex marriage. On same-sex marriages, Rose cites a Brownback directive that says the state cannot take action against clergy or religious organizations that refuse to carry out or recognize same-sex marriages. Question, Mary, is that not simply an affirmation of religious liberty?
No, nothing that comes from Sam Brownback on this subject is simple. What his statement was, and by the way, before, just have a word about that, what a tale of two cities. After the Supreme Court decision was made, Jay Nixon's public event was so dignified, congratulatory, honest, straightforward, and simply asked all of his agencies to treat gay people.
In the interest of time, can we stay with the Rose article?
What it was an attempt to, in some significant way, deceive the people of Kansas into thinking that there is anything about the Supreme Court's decision that would allow any gay couple to force a religious person, a clergyman or clergywoman, to marry them. I mean, it's just ludicrous, isn't it, when you think about it? What relationship is there between gay marriage and whether Pastor so-and-so doesn't want to marry people? Of course they would never have to. We have radical religion.
He's just trying to confirm that, is he not, with his statement?
Well, it was confirmed.
I mean, this is a concern nationally.
When the Constitution was 1789.
Woody, isn't that a concern that you've heard from people? Hang on a second. Haven't you heard this concern from people nationwide about the question of religious liberty? In fact, I think the Supreme Court addressed it in part.
That's why he needn't have done anything about it. It's in the decision, Supreme Court Justice.
He was just reconfirming what the Supreme Court
Justice Kennedy said, and I quote, "They will be free to teach and advocate their religion." But what the First Amendment says is the freedom to exercise their religion. And Scalia, in an opinion Kennedy saw before he published his, said it's ominous that the word exercise, which is the actual language of the Constitution, isn't there. And Kennedy could have solved Scalia's problem by simply inserting exercise. He didn't do it. He refused to do it knowingly. And look, they've got this guy out in Washington who's been hit for $137,000. There are county clerks. There's a county clerk being sued in Tennessee right now because she said, "I won't do that for you, but the lady down the counter there will." They don't care. They're suing her.
If this protection is not needed, why is it a concern that he issued the directive?
Well, I have this question. When is Rose going to write a column about Colorado legalizing pot in defiance of federal law, about San Francisco having a sanctuary city in defiance of federal law, if he's concerned about who defies federal law?
What we're concerned about, Mike, is that he also added, unlike Governor Nixon, that he will be introducing a bill in the next legislature to expand his exclusion of married gay people out back into one more try in the private sector, so that businesses and all kinds of public services
he won't be able to expand it beyond the scope of federal law, will he?
Well, I don't think he will be able to do it because I don't think Kansas corporate and private leaders will allow it.
I want to ask Jim something. In this article, Steve Rose says Faubus would feel right at home in Kansas today. Do you find that to be an accurate assessment or something rather outrageous?
Well, I'm old enough to remember Orville Faubus, and maybe a lot of people don't, but I remember Orville Faubus and the positions he took at the time. I don't know whether that's an accurate statement or not. I will simply say this on behalf of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. We have disagreed pretty consistently with Governor Brownback on a number of issues, whether it's tax policy or education or higher education. We respectably disagreed on a lot of issues, and I suspect we'll continue to do so.
But you've never seen any evidence, I suspect, that he's a racist.
No, I certainly have not.
When he calls out the National Guard, it'll be time to worry about it.
So, Gwen, you want to jump in here with something?
No, I just felt I agree with Mary 100%. The governor, that move was just totally unnecessary and a show of defiance. And to Woody's point about the local county clerk person saying, "I won't do it," but this person, as an employee of the county, a public entity, she has no choice. She should have been terminated.
And Kansas is complying with federal law, as far as I can tell.
She should have been terminated.
It is time now.
So no fundamentalist Christian can be
It's time now for Roast and Toast. Gwen, we're in the middle of Roast and Toast, where the Ruckettes speak up and speak out about people and events in the news, and we start with Woody.
Well, mine's actually a book recommendation, a toast to Thomas Fleming for this book, which, by the way, Steve Rose desperately needs to read. It's called the Great Divide, the conflict between Washington and Jefferson and how it defined a nation. And the conflict that you're hearing between Brownback and the Supreme Court was going on at the foundation. It's still going on. And as long as this is America, it is going to continue, Steve, even if it upsets you. But it's a great book by Tom Fleming. I recommend it.
He's a fine author, Jim.
Mayor James, in his introductory comments at the top of the show, commented upon the progress of the Kansas City streetcar line from the River Market to Crown Center. I'd just like to toast Mayor James and the city of Kansas City, Missouri, for the progress they're making on that project. It is on budget. It is on time. This time next year, we'll all be taking advantage of it and riding the streetcar. And I also want to comment from an economic development point of view that one of the predictions was it would spur terrific economic development and growth along Main Street. When you drive up and down Main Street, as I do just about every day, you see that. It is coming to fruition. So a toast to the mayor and the city of Kansas City, Missouri for the streetcar.
Mary.
Well, at a time when all of the Metro is engaged in a question of how much people should be paid, I want to roast Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush gave us reason to really wonder, you know, who are these people? When the top-ranking, I think maybe he's number 2 now, Republican running for president in the country says what's the solution to inequality in pay is that the American people are not working long enough. What we need to do is have Americans working more hours in the day. Tell that to the truck driver and the nurse and people working in fast food and so on, that they just need to work more hours. Hillary Clinton's response to him at the convention was magnificent.
Quickly, Gwen.
I wanted to toast all of the low-wage workers who have been putting up the good fight to increase the minimum wage in Kansas City. This is a very important issue for hardworking and the hardworking poor in our community. And I'm glad that this is in the forefront of deliberations. I hope that the City Council will make the right decision. Will have made the right decision today. Yeah. I forgot this will be short.
And finally, here's a toast to comedian Conan O'Brien and a lot of folks on Facebook for some lighthearted comments about Donald Trump's run for the presidency. O'Brien points out that Trump's remarks about Mexican immigrants caused Macy's to stop carrying his clothing line. Now O'Brien says PetSmart is dropping his shampoo. And a lot of folks on Facebook shared this slogan for Trump's campaign: "We shall overcome." And that is Ruckus for this week. We're back next Thursday at 7. Now on behalf of the Ruckettes and the crew, Mike Shannon saying thanks for watching and good night.